Hi everybody, welcome back to my coloring channel. Today I'm going to be looking at Country Charm, the coloring book that is written by Teresa Goodridge. For this one, I haven't really done anything. The only one I have is a work in progress with these lemon yellows. And so what I want to do is make sure that I have a completed page within this book, and I'm planning on looking at fall themes. So I've marked out a few pages that remind me of the fall. One of them is this one because it has some pumpkins in it. The next one is here because she looks rather cold, and I have a few more marked out which I might explore in this video. So beginning with the first one with these beautiful little pumpkins in the corner, and I love just the details in the wood paneling, I want to talk a bit about how I'm choosing my colors. So I'm jumping into Sarah Renee Clark's color catalog. I go to keywords, I go to autumn, and I see all the different potential colors. I take out her color cube. And the colors that I'm choosing are 53, 67, 260, and 261. This gives me a really good range of those oranges and those greens and those yellows that you need for a good fall theme. And over here with my swatch cards, I'm trying to best match them to the Ohuhu marker set that I have. And I'm looking for a good range of values from going really light to really dark within each color, because that'll allow me to blend the most smoothly. And so here we go, wrapping up the first draft of my swatch sheet. Of course, I'll be changing this as I go, but it's a good set to get me started. For this particular pumpkin, I used the colors Y9 Yellow Ochre, R4 Deep Red, YR3 Orange, Y10 Apricot, and YR4 Salmon Pink. And so to kind of show you how I did it, I worked from dark to light, just defining the edges and then adding in the shadows with the yellow ochre at the very end. And so starting with that nice red color to just show the indents, and then from that working lighter and lighter until I leave a little spot for a highlight, and then in that highlight end with that really light salmon pink color, and then coming again with the shadows. And so I do this over and over, section by section, just kind of blending it from that dark into that light to really help these pumpkins look luminous and pop. I'm not coming into this little tree bush in the corner here, so I put a base layer of my lightest green, moved up with my mid green, and then built up the layers with getting darker and darker every time. I had my shadows kind of go along the edges so that the center had the nice light shine on it, and I also made sure that I was following the different line art that Teresa Goodridge has provided, because that to me is where the shadows should also lie. So then just smoothing it all out to have my nice ombre effect here. I then realized it was a bit too smooth, so then I added in the darker lines to kind of just show some dimension to it, and that helped give it a bit more texture, which was really nice, but still had that really pretty center glow that was achieved with that lighter color maintained in that middle. I then continued by adding in some of the browns for the woods over here. I went into making this pot look brassy by using the yellow ochre and the light yellows, and leaving some of the white spaces for highlights, and that really helped make it look really metallic. I then moved into coloring in the Christmas wreath, getting those red berries in, using my mid green for the base layer so I can build it up into the dark green and let the other ones pop. Coming in with the pine cones, again light into dark, and my light source seems to be coming from the upper right. And I really loved making these bricks here. I used the terracotta colors with the YR5, YR10, and YR91 for those. This door proved to be challenging because I accidentally colored in what should have been the glass, and when I was trying to correct it by going over with Posca pens, going over with even acrylic paint, it kept on absorbing that red from underneath, so I just gave up and decided for this one I'm going to have a bit of a pinkish glass for my door. And the final elements left to complete over here were the maple leaf vines in the corner, and I just had so much fun coloring them in with this ombre effect with my reds and my oranges and my yellows and my greens, and I just kind of plopped the colors down next to each other, and they mixed naturally because alcohol markers tend to blend on their own. And here you go. So for this next section here, I am coloring in the trees using fall colors, and I'm trying to do the stippling effect to create variety with the colors. And so I started with the Y2, and the yellow went into the yellow ochre with the YR2, went into the orange, and then ended with a red. And so it seems to be good at creating this sense of variety within the different leaves. And I ended by going over with the red again to kind of contour some of the bunches of the leaves to give it a bit more dimension. And here you can see the rest of it coming in on a extra fast replay. And that is it for those leaves. The tree finishes with the bark, and over here I'm using the Y148 and then outlining it with the Y12. So for the girl, I wanted her jacket to kind of be blue, so I did a really light blue and then added some darker ones to shadow it. I used the terracotta combination for her hair, and then kind of like the darker brown for the dog with some yellow, and I left her pants white. For this next section here, I started with the GY43, and then I went over it with the GY42, so it's still relatively dark, but still has a bit of dimension for those bushes over there. And then to kind of maintain a bit of fullness for these leaves poking out, I did the yellows, and then the oranges, and then the reds, to kind of make them look like they're beginning to turn with the fall colors as well. And this next section is the wood, and I'm slowing this down a tiny bit to explain how I'm doing it. I'm starting at the Y145, and as I am going into it, I'm laying that down as my first base coat using the feathering technique where you kind of just like flick the pen up and then go a bit darker. And then this one over here, I switched over to the YR5, so the terracotta actually, so I'm switching between my two brown groups. And then it is, again, just kind of building with that layering effect to create that sense of dimension. And I'm coming into the Y12 to add some of those darker tones to, again, create those sense of shadows and depth and dimension, leaving the center part of that wood highlighted. And so ended it with Y292 for the deepest, darkest shadows just right along the edges and behind where it's hidden by the foliage. And then this process essentially continues with the rest of this wood in Little Bridge House. So again, laying down a nice base coat, and then after that going into the darker ones, going just along the top edges over here to lay out those shadows, and then again following it along with the bottom, trying to go around my foliage, blending it out with that previous lighter color to make sure it's a smoother blend. I guess the technique I'm using is layering, not necessarily blending, because I'm putting colors on top of each other as opposed to blending colors next to each other. But it seems to be working pretty well for this page so far. The paper is relatively thin, it's printer paper, and so I have a lot of bleeding with these colors, and I can't really keep a very crisp edge. But if the entire piece has a bit of a bleed through, it kind of just creates a stylized look, and so I don't really mind it. And now over here, again, I'm trying to make this inside part of the wood darker than the outside because technically there's less sunlight. So if the light source is coming from my upper right-hand corner, like you can see with the trees, that right-hand wall should be lighter, and then that inside wall should really be much darker since it's pretty much in the shadows. But the contrast was a bit too intense and too deep, so I'm going over it a bit more on that side to darken it out so that it looks like it's still part of the same building by having a similar shading with the woods over there. And then to kind of end, I'm coming up here, wrapping it up at the top, and this time I'm contouring it along each plank individually because I'm imagining this is the closest to the viewer, and so you have a way more detail. And then I wanted to make sure it looked nice and old, and so I came in with my darkest color to just add some agedness to the wood, and I ended it off with a dark roof for a final nice contrast. And so to wrap it up, I made the background much darker and then the foreground much lighter to help with perspective. I made the grass yellowing the way it does in autumn, and here is my completed piece. Off camera, I also finished the work in progress with the lemons. Not my favorite blending, I was a bit tired at this point, but I did really love those boots. I decided to push through with one final piece here, and this time I'm using colors YR4, YR5, YR10, and YR91. I wanted to show you with the caps this time so you can see what I mean when I say that I layer, going from the lighter colors to the mid colors and then the darker colors. And once I go through all of those color ranges, I come back around reversing it with the mid color and then finally using that lightest color to blend it out. I did read online that some people discourage you from using those lighter colors to blend things out because it does bleach the darker colors and leads to a really faded effect. However, when you're dealing with such unconventional shapes such as this wall, I'd rather have it be a bit less saturated than have it be overly streaky, and so I don't mind blending it out with that lighter color and the effect that it has on this piece. This paper also, as you can see, is very, very thin, and so I have that bleed through working to my advantage here to just fill in the cracks of the wall. Coming into the stones in the path, we have warm gray 1, warm gray 3, warm gray 4, and warm gray 9 to complete these small pieces. So again, with my layering, lightest color first, then my mid color, trying to make it get some good textures, emphasizing those textures that I'm trying to create with the darker color, and also some of the shadows underneath the grasses, and then finally blending it out with that first original warm gray 1. I then used a colorless blender to dig back some of those highlights. This is a cool use of a colorless blender because it really does depigment those areas, and so you can really dig in those highlights that you had initially lost. I would not use a colorless blender to blend, however, I can't quite figure out that technique. And so then I continued using that for the rest of my rocks on my lower left hand corner. I then used the same colors to finish off the rest of the path, emphasized all those little rocks, added in a few extra pebbles, brought in some shade and shadows for where the rocks would have been casting some shadows, and then moved into desaturating that original wall with my warm gray 4 because it was just a bit too bright at this point, and now it matches the pathway a bit better. So coming into my foliage, I have G020, GY4, GY42, and GY43. So starting with my lighter color, moving into my mid color, and you guessed it, moving into my darker color before ending with a quick blend of my lighter color. And so then I continued this with the rest of the foliage on the lower right-hand corner of this piece, and was just using the marker strokes a bit more roughly to kind of create a bit of texture there. The next section I'm going to tackle is water, and here I'm using the colorless blender, warm gray 1, cool gray 200, and blue gray 3. And blue gray 3 is the only bluish color that I have for this water because I really want it to be desaturated. I'm imagining this is a very overcast day, so many of the colors are not going to be overly bright and vibrant. And so I'm using the blues closer to the edges, and then towards the center I'm blending it out with the colorless blender, and then I'm adding some of that the grays to again start to desaturate it, and just repeating this process throughout. It really helps create a sense of water without it being overwhelmingly blue, and I'm using some of that chisel tip to give me a bit more texture in certain areas here. I use those same color combinations to fill in the glass of the windows because windows being glass will be reflecting the sky. And now I'm coming into the very, very fun ombre effect with my fall foliage here. These are the same vine looking leaves that we had in that earlier piece I did in this video, and so I'm just doing that same technique of just putting down various colors next to each other and then having them slowly bleed and blend into each other. Again, since alcohol markers are wet, the colors after a minute will tend to merge in that central area where they're overlapping and just create a really nice easy blend. So wrapping it up with the final few leaves in my upper right hand corner, and then moving into what ended up being my favorite part in this entire project, which are these trees. I just find them so beautifully done. I had to have a quick cuteness break here with my cat Minnie though, who needed a quick cuddle before I could get back to coloring in these gorgeous trees. Aren't they pretty with those highlights? So going in with wood and then some of the grass at the back, and I really wish for this part I did that stippling effect from my earlier one. I feel like going in with lines just made it not as nice as those stippling effects for those leaves. And then finishing off with my wood over here, the same sort of colors that we were using earlier, Y145, Y148, Y12, and then at times, not in this one, but at times using the Y13 to just add in some of those darker shadows. and then finishing up with the water wheel section, coming on up to the rest of this beautiful wood, making sure I'm following the contour lines of the wood that she provided using her ink drawings. And then I'm using the terracotta color combinations for the windowsills to show that that is made out of a different type of wood. I make sure the back paneling is light, that under the roof is really dark, and again the terracotta for the roof. And this starts to wrap it up for me over here. And so I hope you enjoyed watching these videos. Here is my final piece for piece number 4. If you're interested in my updated color swatch, this is all the colors I ended up using. And over here we have my coloring piece number 1, coloring page number 2, coloring page number 3 with those really cute boots, and finally coloring page number 4. Thank you very much for watching my color along. I hope you have a good day. Bye!